Hello, my citizens. It's another vlog. Back in the day, Spooky Room used to be a vlog where you would, publish stuff and print stuff for games and have stats and things. And these days, you might as well be throwing that out into the wind because no one will ever see it. But now, we can put this on YouTube where people actually do go to look at things. So, these are going to be coming up and hopefully get a little better with each one. So we're going to talk about today Lair of Sword Sorcery. Kind of a retrospective. My old fans know that I made this game, Lair of Sword Sorcery, but people that are going to the YouTube channel or the Spooky Room site now would have no idea. They think that I just appeared out of nowhere. Ooh. But I want to get my art juice going. 1 second. Oh my goodness. Fans of the podcast will recognize this. There we go. We got some art juice going. So nowadays, if you don't put something out on video, no one's going to see it. So, and the blog has gone through 4 different homes before landing. We went with WordPress, Blogger, Weebly, and then finally, it's a Bloom Tool site now. So all that stuff that I did over the years is good. Disappeared. But the game still exists, and you can still actually buy this over at Presses Intermedia, Precis. But let's just do a little retrospective on the old game before I start doing a couple more of these posts about the new game, Concordia, which we'll get into, in the future. Let me just get the other camera going. Using OBS here, and it's fantastic. Sorry guys, you see a little IV cam there. I'm not paying for the software. It's fine. So there we are, the very first Lair of Sword Sorcery issue. There you go. And it was released in a comic book format because I thought it was different and exciting, but mostly because of Conan the Barbarian. They had an issue, it was called Worlds of Conan or something like that, and it was a background of the Conan the Barbarian universe that listed all the lands like Zamora and the weapons that all the different countries used and all sorts of exciting stuff. Let me just check the audio. I've already recorded this once and I just want to make sure the audio is working. Okay, good. So that's why I went with a comic book format and to make it more accessible to people that don't play RPGs. So at the time, this is before watching Let's Plays on YouTube about D&D, and before the whole D&D thing exploded again, we had OSR was our big thing, and was big on Blogger, which was the Google G+ thing. You could follow your sites. And different blogs and things, and whenever you'd log into your G+, it would say, ooh, there's an update on Blogger, which is great. But now, it's gone. What are you going to do? So back then, OSR was big, and so this is meant to appeal to people that played like Hero Quest, and that weren't really into role-playing games per se, but like doing the role-playing thing. And I did Demon Board first, because this is how to make your own playing mat for D&D. A place with all the miniatures and the maps and the walls and things. So I thought this was the one that would get people excited. But it did end up becoming a whole game system on its own. And it takes place in the world of Catharca, which is a world that I invented for my AD&D first edition game, and ended up becoming its own thing in all of this. Catharca. And look, ooh, the world. You got the winter lands up here, you got the autumn lands down here, and you got the summer lands down here. So it's always winter here, always autumn here, always summer down here, that kind of a world. And here's a little, this little tiny bit here is this inset here. So this is the place where most of your adventures are going to happen in Lair of Sword Sorcery. And zooming in on this spot here, you got this here. And really, this is where most of your adventures are going to happen, right around the city of Stroberno, which is here-ish. Little thing on the Winterlands. Platinum. In this game, platinum was very important. Platinum was like its controlled substance. And that's because the Black Emperor who ran the world of Cartharca actually would make sure that all platinum would go down into the Summerlands where he could use it for magical purposes, but nobody knew that at the time. It's not how the game. It's not the game. It's how you can be part of it. And this was the idea that people were gonna like play this game and get involved and send things in and do stuff. It didn't quite happen that way though. But people they liked the game. They enjoyed the book anyway. The game is called Lair of Sword and Sorcery because it's a magazine. But is the game called Lair of Sword and Sorcery? Yes. The game itself is called Lair of Sword and Sorcery. Like, D&D had its Dragon magazine. So I was making that clear. What is the game about? Playing a fantasy game. Spirit of the game is mostly about making your own stuff. What is the Demon Board? Now that is the actual playing place where you would actually have the game. It's a grid. Move your miniatures around on the grid like in Hero Quest. And there would be walls, doors, all that stuff that you could see. And here's how to make it step by step. This is all basic tools that you can get at the dollar store. Dollar store craft paints, dollar store erasers, a little bit of contact cement. And here's a Bristol board. That's what we call them here. It's that 24 by 36 basic piece of cardboard. It's a little smaller than that, but basically that size. You would draw your grid. Here we go. Let's see if we can get a little closer on that. You would draw a grid on it of 1-inch squares with a pencil. And then you would use these craft paints and these stampers to stamp a bunch of little squares that make it look more like a dungeon floor or a cave floor. See here, you can see what the stamper looks like. And here are my actual stampers that I actually used in the game. So you just wipe your paint on it with a brush and stamp, 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 stamp. And they would get these great little boards. Instead of having to pay, $50 or $60 for a battle mat that's dry erase or doing all this stuff. No, Bristol board, paint, and an eraser. This goes into how to make your own stamp. And here is the actual process of stamping some on a board. Not bad. So I thought, even if the game itself didn't take off, maybe people will be interested in making their own demon boards. Here's a nice one. Back in these days, color was still really expensive, so you would do all of these magazines in black and white. All these pictures I have in color somewhere, but, who's going to find those? Then you could also make the walls. Now here's all the different walls, and the walls are basically, you do the same thing on the Bristol board, make all your pattern of squares, and then just fold it up into a wall. Here's a whole stack of walls. And you'd have long walls, short walls, tiny, tiny walls, and then you can make any layout that you wanted. And just put them down on the board, done. And it's not exactly a revolutionary idea, but nobody showed you how to do it step by step like this. The other option was demon blocks. These were little clay walls that you would make up in squares of 2, and then you could just lay out however you want. And there's a recipe in here for making salt dough, which is ostensibly cheaper than buying clay, but they sort of rot over time, 3 or 4 years. So you get a few years out of it, and you paint it black and would do your thing. Now here's the actual stamper for making your clay walls. I don't have mine anymore. Mine's long gone. But I used to have hundreds and hundreds of those blocks around here. And I used to sell them at conventions, but nobody bought them because it's far easier to make your own. More about how to make the blocks. Here's a good picture of the blocks. So you would stand these up on their side, and then they would make these great little walls. Fantastic. Better than cardboard, I guess, because the cardboard kind of moves around sometimes. It's a little light, but it's fine. And you could also make these great things like a little pyramid made out of blocks. Or little pillars made out of blocks. All sorts of exciting stuff. And, here we go. A color picture of a demon board with its little blocks. And it was a fun way to play D&D. I hadn't played a lot of role-playing games for a while at this point. But I decided to get back into it because I found these little toys and thought it would be fun just to make a little dungeon. And being the artistic sort that I am, I wanted to do it quickly and easily, and this worked out really well. So a lot of people would get a demon board and they'd say, oh, I'm very excited about making a demon board. I'm going to play Lair of Sword Sorcery. And then they might make a demon board or something, but I never heard of too many people actually playing the game. Now, issue 2, you actually get some stuff for the game. This is called Combat. So, this had the rules for actually getting in a fight. I mean, most role-playing games are essentially just a bunch of loosely connected rules of combat and some other stuff for when you're not in combat, but who uses those? But also, the character creation rules are in here. So you got some, how can I get involved? Nobody ever did. What is Lair of Sword and Sorcery? Going about the game again. And here we have some more background for the world. So I was putting out a lot of background stuff for the world in these issues. What is the Winterlands? That's that upper area I was talking about, Stroberno. Now that's the main city that the characters would adventure in. And I got fleshed out a lot in the AD&D campaign I had before I started this game. And the players actually built a lot of it themselves and added a lot as we were going along. So this talks a little bit about the government organization. This is a Targ, the government leader. This is a, we called them Grumpkins at the time, but apparently that's a copyright thing, so now we call them Stonekin. But they were these little creatures that were blind and deaf, but could feel vibrations. And whenever they would find you, they would call in more. So whenever you would try to attack one, more would get called in. Then you would attack them and more would get called in. We'd say it's Grumpkins all the way down. Here's a map of the city here. There we go. I'd show you PDFs of all these, but I don't actually own the game anymore, so sorry, you have to go to Presses Intermedia for that. You're just getting a little overview. Now here is some ruins, but here is Shack Town. That's where your characters actually mostly live their lives. They would build the shack here for free, and then go out and do their adventuring until they got to higher levels, and they could maybe move to an inn, or maybe if they were citizens of good standing, get one of these Targ houses by becoming part of the Targ, or building their own stone house. Temple up here. Here's some Imperial stuff. And the first character sheet, this is going to change a little bit over time, but this is how it looked at the beginning. Here's the big double-sided mace of Cartharca. Characters never really grabbed any of those weapons, but there was always pictures of them. Another character sheet. There's equipment in the world of Cartharca, because you need to have an equipment list before you can have a weapons list. So there's different weapons, armor that you can get. Equipment in the world of Cartharca rules. There's some how many weapons can you carry, because once you have to carry weapons, then you need carrying rules, encumbrance rules. Here's the different coins: rough gems, cut gems, copper slips. Now copper is the main basis of the money, because iron is actually quite valuable in this world. So it would go copper, silver, gold, iron in this world. So these larger ones would be iron coins. So if you wanted a fancy steel weapon, that would count as a +1 or a +2, because it's a fancy steel weapon. We're talking about like a kind of a Bronze Age world, and most of the iron would come from the Winterlands. That's where your characters were living. So finding some iron was a valid way. It was more important than finding gold. Armor list, equipment list. This is the basic equipment you can carry. A lot of it was hand-waved at that time, and basic equipment is whatever you need, you can get. You're a character that's carrying around iron, so you could afford anything. And here we go, actual combat rules. And basically it was you took your attack roll, you rolled some dice and added it to your attack roll. The enemy would take their attack roll and roll some dice and add it to it, and whoever was higher caused damage to the other person. But you also always took 1 point. Whether you won the combat or you lost the combat, you would take the damage. So you always lost at least 1 point. And that meant if you were fighting a bunch of goblins and you were a very powerful character, even though you were winning all of those attacks and causing a lot of damage and killing them, you would always take 1 point every time you attacked somebody. So if you were taking on large groups of people, it was not a good way to go. But we had also, I think the healing rules are in this section as well. It was called being tired, not being wounded. So you would get tired out from attacking all these people, and then after the combat was over, you would get to rest. And this is before short rest and long rest in D&D. So it was equivalent to a short rest where you'd gain half your hit points back. So if you were in a whole lot of combats and you were doing badly, it would not be good. But if you were doing okay and only attacking 1 or 2 guys, it was good because you would get half your hit points back, half the hit points you had lost. And then we start talking about demon boards and figures again. Where are you going to find your figures? Here's a nice big bucket that you would get at Toys R Us at the time. And it would have a bunch of knights in there with swords and different weapons, and you could use those basically for everything you needed them to. Because again, D&D can be expensive. All those miniatures and all the things. It's like, just buy some toys, throw them on how to make your own base, throw it on the demon board, and you're good to go. And where to find other toys and things. And I think we start talking about doing something other than attacking. SOTA, something other than attacking. So in the combat rules, built right in, once you started a combat, you would be in combat mode. And that means that you can either attack or do something other than attacking. So that would be the other actions you can do, either using a skill or just running across the room or swinging on a chandelier. Let's play a board game, the Lair skirmish game. So this is a more basic version of the combat rules, and it included a little skirmish game on this board. Player 1, Player 2, Player 3, Player 4, and you would get a certain number of men, and then you could all fight it out, and that's how you would learn how to play the combat game, is through playing this little skirmish game. But also these skirmish rules could be used for regular combat. So the Lair game is so simple that it's very easy to do large numbers of miniatures, like you can have like 10 or 20 guys there, and all the attacks are so quick that it's like zip, 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 zip. Lair skirmish game versus a role-playing game. So this explains that there is no SOTA in the skirmish game, there is no extra skills, and that's the idea that there is something more than just attacking in a role-playing game. So this is explaining role-playing really to people who have never done it before. Expanding Lair of Sword Sorcery to a full role-playing game that's talking about later issues that are coming. And Miner's Ambush, the first Lair of Sword and Sorcery scenario. So that means you have characters, yes, but you're basically playing the scenario game with them. And here we have a little demon board. So already at this point, I had decided I want the demon board to be the basis of the game. So an adventure would take place on the demon board. You could use up the whole demon board, and you would just mark down where the map was. And later on, you'll see in the templates that this is basically the same thing I do all the way through. And a little something on creating your own scenarios, so your own skirmish scenarios. And that, is a way for people to enjoy the game without having to wait for all the other books to come out. And here we see another demon board. We see a big epic fight between these guys with the swords. And ooh, here's some bugs that came out of a toy store tube of bugs. And some DMC demons and a wizard there. Pretty nice. And that little castle is from Siege. A little Siege board game like crossbows and catapults. So you could actually, and here's a little bit of moss there for trees. So you could do a lot without you really spending a lot of money. Now, Veteran is issue 3. So each one had its own title. This one is Veteran, issue 3. And that's 2015. So we've gone on like March of 2015. The first one started, I think, December. Let's check. Yeah, December 2014. So these were coming out fairly quick, and I love this cover. You got the barbarian guy here on his big throne, a bunch of lava in the background, and all these cats. Oh, it turned out great. Hold on, we're just going to stop recording for a minute. And looking at Lost issue 3. That's the veteran issue now. In Lair of Sword and Sorcery, veterans are the ones that are the higher level characters. So you start off, you're just a basic character, and instead of becoming level 1, level 2, level 3, you would earn veteran points instead of experience points. And you would spend those veteran points on other skills, other abilities, because it wasn't a class-based system either. If you weren't a fighter or a wizard or a thief, you were just a character, and you could do anything you wanted. So everyone would start off fairly useless. And then as soon as you started getting your veteran points, you could then start spending it on things that made you more interesting. And it was a point-buy system for the characters, so they could, in theory, start off with some skills in sorcery or thievery or what have you, but not that much. So veteran points was what you earned, and then you would spend them to build up your character. Oh, look, they get involved. Google, Facebook, email, retailers, piracy. Not of any interest. Who thought we got to issue 3? All zines at the time always got to issue 2 and then never went any further. So you would always have the first issue, everyone's very excited. You would barely get the second issue out, and then issue 3 would never happen. So who thought we'd get to issue 3? Here we're talking about the Lair veteran system. That's what I was just talking about. Spending veteran points. So you would spend them on your ability to attack, your ability to defend, or on special skills like crafting. So the crafting rules are also part of the veteran book. So you see quickness, camaraderie, body skills, vitality. These are all groups of skills that you could buy that would increase your character. Otherworld is the wizardy stuff, although that will change a bit by the time we get to the sorcery issue. Everything was always in flux and changing and going through playtesting as it went through. Crafting in the world of Cartharka. So crafting was, building a new sword or making a new piece of armor or building a house or a piece of furniture. Here we first start talking about potions. Potions weren't a big part of this game, so once you could actually make a potion of some sort, then it was very exciting. But potions in this game weren't like healing or mana potions. They were more like, like a healing tonic or an oil or a firebomb kind of thing. Fame and favor. Now this is a big part of the game. So you would get veteran points, yes, which would make your character more powerful, but to do anything you would need fame and favor. So as your characters completed adventures, you would gain more fame for being the guy that did that. And so you would go out into the world, and if you were famous enough, you would get free room and board at the inn. Or if somebody met you and you said, "Oh, well, I want to buy a sword," they would say, "Oh, well, please take this sword." Da, 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 da. So you could use your fame, and there was a dice roll and actual rules built into this to try to use your fame to get things. You'd say, "I'm going on this adventure, I'm going to save your village from blah, blah, blah." They said, "Well, you're very famous, I'll give you the sword." Favor was specifically, "I need you to do me a favor." So that would be things like lords would owe you a favor for completing an adventure. So if you, say, staved the city of Strobano from a bunch of invaders, the Targ would owe you a favor. And at that point, you could use it to cash in to say, "I want to build a house, I want to join the Targ, I want to do something like that." And there were dice rolls for that as well. Favor system, cashing in. And if you got too famous, you had to actually retire your character, because you'll see in the system that at that point you can just do anything you want and people will just let you do it because you're so famous. So there's no point in adventuring anymore. The favor roll continues. Debt repayment roll, that's the favors. When they actually give you your debt, sometimes that will continue on. They'll say, well, this favor you've asked for is not enough. I still owe you something. And then you have the dements. That is the place where your characters live. And for the veteran things, say you want to get better at fighting or you want to get better at defending, you have to go through combat training. And to do that, you have to have a place at your house where you can either practice or have a teacher come by and do those things. Or if you want to become better at crafting, you want to become better at anything, you need something at your dements to do that. And that is dements features. So you would start off with your shack, which didn't have too much in it, but you could keep adding to it. Legends of the Winterlands, so you get some more of the Winterlands lore. Hero Sorcerer. So here's where we basically just barely touch on the magic stuff. It's very vague because we haven't done the magic stuff yet. That'll come in a later issue. Additional rules for the Demon Lord and Heroes. This is where you have to add in some things as you go along and say, okay, well, we need this for a role-playing game. We need that for a role-playing game. Editorial thoughts on travel and distance. Traveling. Followers. So in this game, it's like henchmen in D&D. But followers are more like the followers in like the Talisman board game, where they literally, you control them. You can do whatever you want with them. The DM doesn't control them and do their things, and then you sort of make suggestions about what they should do. You sort of own them. And when you're moving around on the demon board, you control those little followers to do attacks and things. Although they do have a flee roll, and there it is. And there's certain skills you can get to increase the power of your followers, like they flee less, or I think they become more powerful? Oh well. Steel weapons and armor. Here's where we actually start talking about the whole iron thing. So steel weapons and armor are like the almost magical items. You have to find someone that can actually work steel. You have to find some iron coins or some iron pieces for them to actually work into the metal. And then you would pay them a certain amount of probably iron to do it. New weapons and rules for combat. Here's stuff for fighting with two weapons, two-handed weapons, because we had to come up with those things in between. Negative defense score, that's just something to count. So, oh, well, okay, there's a negative defense score. The Lair ranking system. All right, this is more like Monster Mark from Dungeons and Dragons. So the ranking system is how powerful is your party versus how powerful are the enemies. Because I want to make adventures so that instead of saying in the adventure 3 orcs attack, they would say an equal number of orcs attack to your party, but not like 3 party members versus 3 orcs. So it'd be your party would be a ranking of like say 75 because of all their stats built together. Then you would have 75 points worth of orcs would attack, and you would have a way of figuring that out. And the adventures would always say 1.5, number of monsters or half rank of monsters attack, just to make everything balanced. And then you didn't have to keep on doing all these things during the adventure. It would just always be a half or a full. Oh, some enemies of the Winterland. We got a little monster manual kind of thing going on here. Here's the evil reindeer. See his vicious fangs. Very nonplussed. Love his face. Beasts of Legend. These are things I didn't stat out, but more things that you might want to come up with. Creating your own enemies, so you can make up your own stats for those things. Or make up your own enemies. Running lairs. So this is where we start talking about adventures for real. You've already had the scenarios in the last one, so you say, okay, I understand scenarios, but this is how to actually put some monsters in there, what they can do, what they can't do. See, Sota and the Demon Lord, if you don't list that a monster is actually going to do something, it won't do that thing. So it sort of limits the things that the enemies can do. Running a blind lair. Oh yeah. Running a blind lair just means the whole lair isn't laid out before the characters start going into it. So in the skirmish game, they can see all the walls, they know where everything is before. A blind lair is more like a standard D&D game where you would walk in, see the first room, and then another room is added, and then another room is added after that. But I had to explain things for people that don't play regular role-playing games. Sorcerer's items and enemies, so we're starting to add a little bit of the magic system in here. It's a very low magic world anyway, so it wasn't really too important at the time. Places of interest, the Valley of Fangs. An extra D there for some reason. More lore of the Winterlands. I would always add a lot of more Winterland stuff that I come up with in between the books. More of the maps. And then another demon board picture. I'll include a lot of these demon board pictures to show what you can do. These are blocks you could get at the only store. Time you get a box of blocks, and they have all these triangles and rectangles. And if you paint them up in the same paints that you used to do your lair, they match. It was fantastic. Sorcery issue. I'm back. The Lost Sorcery Edition. Now you'll see, we always had the Lair of Sword and Sorcery adventure game. And this is the issue where we started calling it Lost. Because the magazine itself was going to be called Lost. The game itself would be called Lair of Sword and Sorcery. Just to differentiate the thing. Because at some point the game would be finished and the magazine would continue. And Lost was invented by Adam Miscavige. And so we've got this great new logo. And we just started calling it Lost all the time. It's like, oh, that's pretty good. I'm going to use that. Lost. Lair of Sword and Sorcery adventure game number 4. Sorcery. I think this might be the first time. Nope, there's a date. October 2015. And this is also, you'll notice we switched from the comic book format to the slightly larger 8.5 by 11 with the bleeds trimmed off. And this one is in full color. I really love this issue a lot. So this is talking about all the spooky wizardry and sorcery and weirdness. The great mage wars of the prehistory of the game. See, in Lair of Sword and Sorcery, the world of Cartharka is actually built by the wizard wars that happened way in the prehistory that nobody remembers. There's nothing on the world except for proto-humans and weird creatures crawling around before the elves come, and they ended up breeding with these things to create dwarves, and then the breeding with the dwarves again to create humans, and with various amounts of magic that they can use within. And during all of that, there's also the demons that also live on the planet. And during this time, the demons are forced below ground to a hell kind of space, where that is actually below ground, and the magic sort of bubbles up. And there's a great contract that they have built, which is an actual physical machine that spins and recontextualizes itself so that the rules are constantly changing, and that wizards are able to change those rules to actually make magical effects happen. And the history continues on, really small text. In retrospect, it was a little bit small, but back then magazines actually had text this small. And I wanted every single page to look like an album cover from a heavy metal magazine, or like one of the inserts that goes into it. We've got some fan art here. This is great. Some by Adam Mickiewicz, some by Aaron Larson. And here we start getting the actual rules. Demons in the other world. Talk about all the demons. See, in this world, magic that characters would generally use would be demonology. So you would trap a demon or summon a demon and then trap it and then enslave it to do something for you and then imprison it in an item that item could then use the powers of the demon. So if you wanted to cast a fireball, you would summon a demon that can cast fireballs, enslave it so that it does your will, and then imprison it in an item so that you can cast fireballs all the time. So there are certain veteran skills that are involved with doing all that. So you'd have to have veteran skills to summon, to protect yourself from the demon, then to enslave the demon, and then turn it into an item. So magic was a very complex process. You see on the front guy here, he's got this demon that's working for him, and then these little guys. So most of them would have these little guys that would do basic things, and then this guy would actually come out and do fighting, or cast this lightning that's coming at these tentacle things. There's a dwarf in our world. Looks more like a goblin, but that's what a dwarf looks like. And, the legends always say that they're dead, but they actually still exist. Here's a little wizard by Judd Crandall. Not the Crandall that is my assistant. That's a different Crandall. I love these disco bars going up the side here. Summoning. Protection, that's another skill. Control, that's another skill, but I want this Blade Runner kind of look for the whole thing, just for fun. Command, that's actually forcing them to do something. Enslavement. And then more pictures, and this background was actually part of an animation I was working on, but it didn't happen. How to imprison them in an item, and this would be a mask of some sort that could be used. This guy actually ends up in a lot of things. He was actually from the original version of the Concordia game that didn't happen because Lair of Sword Sorcery is what I was working on at the time, and now this picture has actually ended up in a couple of things for Concordia. So spirits and demons. That's who you actually work with, and they actually are just monsters you can fight as well. And creating spirits. So these would be how to create spirits that the wizards can also, or the sorcerers can use, as well as making spirits and demons that they would fight against in an adventure. And then the back cover. Ooh. So that was a big issue. This is when things were really starting to come along. And a lot of interest in the game. Lots of downloads. At the time, you could only download the PDFs online. If you want to get these printed copies, you had to go to a convention that I went to and actually buy one off of me, or get one off of the website, and I would fold it up and stick it in an envelope. So these unfolded copies you could only get through a convention. Then issue 5. This one was rushed, maybe? I don't know. Doesn't even have the cuts. That's how they all looked on that one. And this is Lair of Sword Sorcery Adventure Game number 5, Lairs. Now it's Lair of Sword and Sorcery for a reason. Sorcery is the magic of the game, and Lairs is because this game, the adventures are a little bit different. So for most games, you would have a map with a room written on it, and you would say, there's 3 orcs in here. Done. And the adventures would be long to write, because you'd have to go out, and sometimes you pre-generate the map, or make it up as you go along, or write something. And I wanted something simpler that would also work with the demon board. We got the editor speaks. Got my usual editorial there. Reduction. And this one came with the Lair templates, which meant that you can literally grab these, fill them in the span of a couple of hours. So you're like, I got an idea for an adventure. I'm going to quickly doodle out a map. Do this part up here. Done. And because at the time D&D had a lot of problems with balancing and the right number of monsters to attack and who's going to do it and the experience points. So we would do it in a different way where you draw your thing and you have objective. That's what they have to accomplish. And the problem with dungeons in D&D is that they can keep going back. So you go down to the dungeon. Once you used up all your spells, you just go back out, and then you come back in again a day later. Here, the objective is always, you must do this, X, whatever it is, on this run. You can't go leave and go back, because otherwise, the punishment will happen. So usually it'll be that there's an enemy in there you have to defeat, and if you don't, then he's going to overrun the town, or attack the town, or kill someone, or do something. And reward is what you get if you beat it. So that would be veteran points, fame, favor, all those things would be in the reward section. Special features, every adventure had to have a special feature. So you couldn't just have, I have a bunch of orcs and the traps you've seen over and over again. You had to have something new in special features. Henchmen available, so people would generally have followers that are coming with them from previous games, but if they didn't, these are the kind of followers that you would have in this game. So you could get some city guards or the local blacksmith, other people that would be allowed to follow you. And the setup is how you're going to get them into the adventure. So that's the basics for a lair. And there's a back page. So you can have all your stats right there for the monsters, the equipment they have, the name, and the notes. That's it. Oh. Bear with me. Just hold on a second while I get the camera going again. And we're back. Oh my god. Apparently the camera's connected but not recording. I don't know. First time with the new camera, so we're working on it. Anyway, my hands are moving again. So we're back to lair templates. So the story templates is something different from the lair templates. So you would have a certain number of layers. So that would be each specific dungeon level or each specific cave with monsters in it, or each specific house with a haunted house. I actually did have an adventure where there was a bunch of monks in a monastery with a haunted house once. But the story template, that is the part where you draw all those together to make one long, what we would call a campaign in the old days, but now we're calling it a story in Lair. And here we have the basic sheet. It's actually just another one more template, and it's only, I think, 2 sheets long. So, story background, story, hook, that's how to get the characters in there. Or they can just wander in. Read aloud text, which I love read aloud text for adventures. I think every adventure should have a read aloud text, even if it's terrible, because it makes it so much better. It gets you in that, we're doing the D&D thing, or we're doing the adventure thing. And then story background for the Demon Lord, that's everything that happens that you need to know. Usually it's just the basics, because they're going to be covered in the layers anyway. And then we have the story flowchart. So the characters start here, then they go on to here, then they go on to here. Sometimes it'll lead to a background story, then it goes back down to here, back down to here. Sometimes these background stories could lead to miscellaneous stories, or they can go here, and if they do something, like say they meet a certain adventurer that doesn't really affect the main story, it can go over here to triggered, which is triggered by meeting that person. And this is sort of a flow chart to keep your entire campaign together. And as you can see, there's a lot of layers that you could put in this small flow chart here. So you could have weeks and weeks, maybe months of gaming right here, as every layer is like, one night kind of thing. And we have tips for the Demon Lord. It's a the sideways issue format was, you see this in comic books every now and then, especially with the Elvira House of Mystery sideways issue. And because the templates were all going to be this format, I decided to do the text this format as well, so you could read the whole thing. So it's yet another neat feature of Lair of Sword Sorcery, and every issue is completely different. So there's tips for the Demon Lord, how to do an adventure. So this is the stuff you'd see in like the DM section. This is like the DM section book. So you see little tips on how to use favors, what should they find in the average lair, making up special features, making up your own monsters, coming up with a story. And then you get an example story. So this is the first big published campaign. So it's a story here, and it's the Temple of the Blind Burrower. You can see, whoop, Temple of the Blind Burrower. There were maybe 5 or 6 small layers that I published on the website, which are gone now to history. But you would get like certain layers, so you'd see these templates ahead of time before this issue. If you're following the website, and they're still out there if you go to the Wayback Machine and know where to look. But those first 5 or 6 very short adventures were cool little things. But this is the first fully like fleshed out story campaign. So the first real published Lair of Sword and Sorcery campaign. And it's Temple of the Blind Burrower. So it's a temple that they have to go to and stop a horrible ritual. It takes place. There's a town nearby. Here's the town here, and you go there a couple of times, and things change. You have to go to the woods to find a special magical item, I believe, some kind of a magic stick. And there were also some handouts that were for the characters, but they're not really required here in the book. And here's the different places they went to, the different dungeons. This is where the final ritual happened. And then back to town. This is if something failed and the ritual stopped and they had to go back to town to do a defense. And there was a whole setup for defending against these evil monsters that were attacking the town. And you can set up blockades and things. So that turned out pretty good. And in the end, you got the final. This is most interesting. The Demon Lord screens. So just like every other role-playing game in the world, we had a screen. And you would alternate these pictures, so you'd have a picture like this that you could stick on the outward facing for the players, and then just those usual things: character creation, starting equipment, soda sections, unarmed combat. So all the stuff you put on a screen, all the rules and equipment lists, were all in this issue. So you would photocopy these and stick them on some cardboard, and stick them up like a regular screen. There's the spider from Spider Time, which hadn't happened yet. And there's a big picture of Spider from Spider Time. This guy appeared in a lot of things. I love that spider. And that is with this issue 5, that was the end of what I call the complete Lair of Sword and Sorcery game. So then I thought I'd get into just doing regular issues with background and adventures and things. But before I did that, we had this. This was available on Lulu, where you could actually order a print copy, print on demand, of the Lair of Sword and Sorcery game. So it's the compilation. And all it had was literally just all the issues. So you get the first 5 issues all bundled into the compilation. Absolutely no change, no difference in layout. Even the page numbers are all based on the page numbers from the issues. But at least you can get a print copy now, ordered and sent to you if you didn't happen to go to the convention that I went to. And I think that's, Blind Burrower is the adventure at the end. Nothing extra, nothing special. But now people could actually get a copy of it and not have to just use their PDFs, which you can get through Drive-Thru RPG, Gumroad, and the website maybe. I might have had it on the Spooky Room website at that time. And then we came out with this Sorceress of Zan. Let's see if we can get this. Oh, I've killed the camera. Hold on again. And we're back. I'm using this is my iPhone, and the software works great. It's just that the cables are really finicky. It's super old. So we got Sorceress of Zan, and the purple Lost logo there. Lair of Sword and Sorcery Adventure Game, issue 6. And this was the first issue that was like a real issue, where you're just you're not building the game from scratch anymore. You're just actually adding stuff to it. And it was super exciting for a few reasons that we'll get into. For some reason, there's nothing on the inside cover. Don't know why. Then the editor speaks. You get your usual stuff: where to buy, indica, links, Lair of Sword and Sorcery.blogspot.ca. We're still at Blogspot back then. Then we have a little background, the Limrust family. So this is a little bit of background for the world of Stroberno, because it gets into religion a little bit, and how people actually just deal with religion in that world, and how they're buried. And it comes into the adventure a little later on, as you see a little picture of the refinery here. This talks a little bit, this is the Limrust family vaults. And we get into crimes in the law, because this issue is actually about doing a lot of thievery stuff in the adventure. So I wanted to do like sneaking, lockpicking, backstabbing in the adventure, and it was just added as a whole bunch of extra stuff, like special features for that adventure. So all of it went into the issue. So a lot of people consider this to be like an extra part of the game, where it's just like this is all special rules, but technically it's all extra. This is all bonus stuff. This isn't the actual game itself, but as you'll see, and when we got to the second edition, this all got built into the main rules. We got here contracts. Well, with the law, you need contracts, and mining law. We got a lot into that because as we were doing the game, a lot of the characters found out that mining is actually a lot more valuable than actually adventuring. So you have to know how to stake a claim, how to control what is yours, and make sure that your ore is taken care of and where it goes and how it happens. And it also comes into the adventure a little bit because the nefarious individuals set up their own refinery as well, so you have to get into that. Sheriffs. There's some sheriffs involved in the adventure, so we have all the rules on sheriffs and the law. Here's a typical Cartharkan sheriff there from the Winterlands. The Targan politics. So this is at this point that players could start, becoming involved with their local politics, because that's part of becoming a citizen of good standing, getting your own castle later on, becoming a lord, and then here you see the citizens of good standing, which I mentioned many, many times during the issues. If you're a citizen of good standing, you can do this. But I never said what you have to do to become a citizen of good standing. It was just sort of hand-waved at that time. But here's the rules for it. Potion crafting. The crafting stuff had already happened, and I wanted to get into like the equipment required, so that's what you need in your demesnes. Potions available to heroes in the world. Here we go. Acids, oils, lights, smoke, fire. These are all things that thieves would use, right? So, especially the smoke one. So I wanted to give them all the things that they could to get through this adventure. And then some more rules on gas cloud movement and sleeping poisons. And here we go, the big article. Sneaks and thieves, roguish activities, and loss. Now, this is just an article in the magazine. It's not actually part of the main rules. But it did become part of it in the second edition. Stealth mode became a whole separate mode from... You have regular mode, combat mode, and stealth mode. Picking locks. And then the actual Sorceress of Zan adventure. Now that we're getting to here, this was available as a PDF as well. And the PDF was in full color and had links. So every single article and the adventure all had a link that you could press. And it would play the song for that adventure or article. So there's a whole Sorceress of Zan soundtrack, which you can still get. It's still on Bandcamp and on Drive-Thru RPG. And there was also, when you got to this part of the book, there was a video, because the action takes place in a refinery, which is a little bit complicated to look at on the map. So I made a video of the entire refinery, zooming around the top of it to see what it actually looks like. You see, here's the characters in the adventure, all their stats, etc. A little bit of story about them, and then you get to the actual story flowchart that we saw in the last Layers issue. It's not a huge story. It's got active story, active stories, and triggers. Oh, here we see a fairly large lair, Selwyn's Mansion. Now this is the place where all the thievery would happen. They were sneaking into this mansion trying to do a bunch of stuff. And as well as the refinery, a lot of sneaking was happening there. Other options for adventure, attacking. Here's other things you could do if the adventurers chose to do something outside of the lairs. You could do your own thing. And then some pictures of the actual model that I built for it. Which would have looked better in color, but hey, we did things in black and white back then. And then the Remember Fun ad. Everyone that remembers Lair of Sword Sorcery remembers the Remember Fun ad. That's in everything. And you can see we got a full bleed, 8.5 by 11 again. For some reason, that Layers issue is just the only one that did not cut down. And then this core 2nd edition rules. Now, how many homemade homebrew adventures get a 2nd edition? So I was pretty proud of this one. This is the black and white version that you would buy at conventions and things. It was a little bit cheaper than the color version. And it mostly just took everything and put it into an easier to understand pile of stuff. And it actually had a table of contents, which all the world stuff will be in one place, all the combat stuff will be in one place, all the character stuff will be in one place. And a few things were tweaked, not much, but mostly with the magic system. A few things were tweaked to get it all in line to be something that make more sense to people. The Spirit of Cartharka. Well, that was the big thing for Lair of Sword and Sorcery. If you can imagine spray painting on the side of a van, it's Cartharka. If you can put it on the front of a heavy metal album cover, it's Cartharka. Here's the basics. That stuff like, have you ever played a role-playing game? Dice? That stuff was added. The Demon Lord and running lairs. An example of play, running the game. This stuff was all added for the second edition rules. Explaining right off the bat combat mode. Then the heroes section. How to make it. The veteran skills. So here's all the veteran section, along with crafting. Because those are all veteran skills. Like the crafting and potion craft and all the thievery stuff, those are all skills. So they're all in the veteran section. Something other than attacking. Oh, there's that wizard again. The sorcery section. Layers all in one section. And then in this book, we actually had a few extra things. The creating layers, resting. So we had a few creating stories using the story sheet. So this is a little bit of new text. Bestiary. Here we go. And the expanded. Cut out the next few pages, including the cardboard, to make a rad Demon Lord screen. So here's the updated screen. So you can see its portrait format now. And the actual equipment lists. This is new in this book. It's an actual equipment list. And Spider Time, which was an adventure that was for the second edition core rules book only. And it's basically you fight a sorcerer that's taken over the body of a giant copper spider. And I believe at the end of this, if we're very lucky, come on, Spider Time. Yeah, you can see the Lair Skirmish game made it into this edition as well, as a starter thing to teach people how to play, as well as the super simple demon board, which is even simpler than the basic demon board, where you just basically take some paper, cut it out, and you're done. As well as how to make some paper miniatures for yourself. This is the version that you got at conventions and things, but you could also order the fancy schmancy drive-through RPG full color edition. Exactly the same, except everything's in full glorious color. Oh my god. And it really wasn't that expensive. I think it was about $30. And you can see all the great things that you've never seen in color before. A lot of the, here we go, Spider Time. Spider Time in color is much better. See that giant spider? Oh, there's refinery pics in color. The actual adventure is in here, but the pictures did make it there. Some more demon board pics. We've seen this one. Part of the one we've seen in the one of the issues. This was on the website for quite a while. More refinery pics there. So it was nice to get a lot of these pictures finally. This was actually a special handout for the adventure. They were fighting. This is where they got that special stick from in that adventure, and that's why I have that special tree. More demon boards here. They are fighting a giant dragon. So yeah, how many homebrew games get to a second edition? And then of course, issue 7 after the 7th edition, we thought, well, we might as well make it available for everyone. So you got the Labyrinth Lord conversion rules, which really, you say Labyrinth Lord, but you might as well say AD&D, OSR, Osric, anything that is D&D like. They're all going to work for the same thing. And that's why it has a more of a standard fantasy theme here than the usual Cartharka stuff. You know, he's got a magic white item here. He's got a bow. Got a dragon over here. And this just gives you all the charts to basically convert everything straight over to regular D&D, but still use the same background stuff. And it actually does take a chance to explain a few last little things that I hadn't gotten out, like magic users. Magic users do exist in Cartharka. They aren't just sorcerers, but their spells are based on, they have to have a platinum amulet, and that's why the platinum was so important in the world before, is because they're actually used by the magic users of the Empire. And the more powerful they emit, the more powerful they can cast spells. And the only difference between D&D and Lair of Sword and Sorcery D&D is that you have a certain number of slots. So, you know, you can either cast 4 level 1 spells or 1 level 4 spell, instead of memorizing X number of spells every day. That and the clerics in Cartharka, you actually do meet your gods. They actually live up in the mountains. And then the AD&D version of the game that I played back when I was making the game up for at the beginning, the clerics didn't have any powers when they started until they met their gods and woke them up, and then they got some spells. The healing magic, elves and dwarves. So this goes into a little bit of the background stuff that I'd never gotten into before. Basic things: endurance to hit points, defense to AC. And the back cover, the same picture again. This is a really quickie thing out. It took a lot longer to write than it did to put together, but you know, that's just the way it goes. And that's Lair of Sword and Sorcery. That was the end of it. Shortly after putting that out, the offer came in from Presses Intermedia, and I took it, and because I was already working on Concordia at that time, and decided to start working on that game. So they bought the game and are selling it to this day. So I hope to put out the next one. We'll be starting to talk about Concordia stuff now that you've seen the stuff I've done before, and that's going to be exciting. See you soon. Goodbye, my citizens.